Hello and welcome to day 3 of PaizoCon 2025. I'm Adam Daigle. I'm Director of Narrative here at Paizo, and I'm here with about half of the narrative team to talk about adventure paths and hardcover adventures. We've got a couple of things currently out right now. We've got Claws of the Tyrant, which recently came out in stores everywhere, and we're about partway through release of Shades of Blood Adventure Path. But we're going to spend most of the time on this panel talking about some upcoming releases. And first, let's introduce the rest of the panel here.
Hi, I'm John Compton. I'm a lead developer on the Pathfinder adventure paths primarily, although I work on a variety of other projects.
Hi, I'm Bill Fischer, and I'm a developer here at Paizo, working on adventure paths and other projects.
And ahoy, I'm James Jacobs. I'm the Pathfinder Narrative Creative Director. I focus mostly on developing adventure paths, but do all sorts of other shenanigans.
All right, so we've set aside some Q&A time at the end of this panel, so get your questions put into the old Twitch chat, and we'll address them as best we can when we get to it. But first, we're going to start off and get Bill to talk a little bit about the upcoming Gatewalkers hardcover compilation.
Yeah, so the Gatewalkers compilation is a compilation of the Gatewalkers AP. It's a 1 through 10 level adventure path, and the premise is that all across Golarion, one night, Ayadara, these elf gates, lit up, and people from all across the world looked into the gates, and they saw visions that made them want to go through the gates. And when they returned, days, weeks, sometimes months later, they had no memory of where they were or what they did during their time through the gates. And so the players are a group of these gatewalkers that have gotten together and decided that they want to find out what happened during their missing moment. So it's a compilation of the AP, and we've entirely remastered it. And I think when we first announced that we were doing the Gatewalkers AP as the next compilation, some people were a bit surprised, because there are plenty of people like me who think the Gatewalkers AP is great. You know, it does a lot of unique things that you don't see in adventure paths very often, especially low-level adventure paths like Gatewalkers. But at the same time, some people, it just didn't resonate with them right away. So what we tried to do when we started putting together the compilation is say, well, what can we do to incorporate some of the legitimate feedback that we've gotten about Gatewalkers into the compilation? Like, we're remastering it anyway. What can we do? And so one of the first things we did was we looked at the deviant abilities that players can get when they start the AP. So if you're familiar with the AP, when Gatewalkers return, some of them come back with these strange, mysterious powers called deviant abilities. And deviant abilities first appeared in Dark Archive, but the problem is that there were only 3 deviant abilities in Dark Archive. So if you have a group of 4 players, and admittedly, deviant abilities, they do give you a choice at when you first get your ability. So you have 6 choices. But if you have 4 players, the chances
still going to be doubling
up. Double up.
Yeah.
You know, that might happen. So the first thing that we did was we said, well, let's come up with 2 more deviant abilities. So now, because of that choice, now we have 5 deviant abilities, 10 different starting abilities that you can have. So the chances that you are going to double up are much smaller. And we sort of looked at deviant abilities with Gatewalkers at least partly in mind. So these 2 new deviant abilities are sort of the eerie, spooky, strange abilities that you might expect a Gatewalker to come back with, and those are going to show up in the free player's guide for the Gatewalkers compilation that is coming up. So,
answered the question I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
Where are these showing up?
Yes. So, so we're really excited about that because that is a, you know, sort of a missed opportunity at first, and now like you are really going to be able to choose a deviant ability that speaks to your character's story at the beginning.
So other than the like, you know, player creation side with the deviant abilities, like, you know, when you dug back into the subject and you opened up the cadaver, what were some of the other changes you were able to make?
So the other thing that we looked at was at the end of the AP, before the players reach the climax of the adventure, they have to go on this long journey. And James, who wrote the last book of the AP, when he heard that, you know, we were doing this compilation and we were going back and looking at things again, you know, James was really excited about revisiting that and maybe making some tweaks to it. So James, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a part of the adventure that I really, really enjoyed the challenge of writing, the whole overland Arctic journey expedition type thing. But I got assigned to the adventure very, very last minute. So I kind of had to scramble, and there was not a lot of room in the outline to cover that. So I decided I'm going to do this expedition in a way that tries to capture the weirdness and the horror and adventure of Arctic expedition, but also the drudgery of it, how long it takes to go hundreds and hundreds of miles across this dangerous terrain. And I overdid it, obviously. So when I got this chance to go back in and rebuild it, I leaned into the infiltration rules, which are in GM Core. And by doing it this way, you have this sort of infiltration of the North Pole, essentially, where there are maybe a dozen different obstacles that you have to cover. And I just pulled out all of those fun little encounters and weird adventure hooks and everything that happened across the ice and focused on those things. So as you're playing through this section, it's an extended infiltration rather than something where you're rolling to see your progress. You check off a box and you do that 54 times or whatever it is. So it should run a lot more quickly, and every time you're doing something, there's something new and interesting, be it a combat or a chance to get treasure or clues or something like that. So hopefully folks are excited to play that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I first read that journey section, I thought to myself, well, wow, like with the right group of players and the right GM, like you could have a lot of fun with this. But like when I read what you had changed, you know, none of the fun encounters are gone. You know, all that is still there, but leaning into the infiltration rules really gives each group their own, you know, dial to your taste, right? Like if you have a group that one is excited to get to the end of the adventure, you can sort of fast forward through that part. But if you're a group that really does want to experience that drudgery of going to the you know, fighting their way through this long journey, and you want to spend a session or two just doing that, you can still do that. So that I thought it was great.
So yeah, like being able to make these changes whenever we do these compilations is a really fun, exciting thing. And, you know, not to mention that really sweet cover that we got for the Gatewalkers compilation. So yeah, Gatewalkers will be out in July. And then also in that same month, we're going to shift our focus from the North Pole and go to a land that has only barely been talked about. And John, talk to us about Mythspeaker.
Yeah, so Mythspeaker takes us to Iblados, which is an archipelago off the southern coast of Casmaron, that big old continent to the east. And we have known about Iblados in some form or fashion since at least Pathfinder First Edition's Inner-Sea World Guide, where it got mentioned a little bit and was kind of Greek-themed a bit. We explored it a little bit more in First Edition, but we've never really adventured there in earnest. And one of the things that really defines Iblados is its connection to mythic power. So rather than necessarily leaning into the like core 20 deities or other classic divine patrons, they basically grow their own. So when somebody's a rising star, and you're like, wow, that's somebody who's really fitting kind of that classical mythological hero archetype. They get brought into the Cyclopses for a prophetic myth speaking that will unlock the path that they might take. And if they follow through on that and they do their cool mythic deed, then they can become mythic beings. And by nature of that, they become what are called hero gods in Iblados. They basically gain divine spellcasting abilities, and they become living demigods that usually live maybe an extra lifetime or two longer than average, but they're by no means immortal. So over millennia, you've had this constant cycle and churn of what the Pantheon looks like. But when prophecy started going on the fritz, back when the Age of Lost Omen started, that affected myth speaking too. So we've had about a century of no new hero gods, and Iblados has been really feeling that. In the course of the Mythspeaker Adventure Path, which goes from level 1 through 9, ends you at level 10, very early on, you're going to gain mythic power, and you're going to become the newest and long-awaited hero gods that Iblados has longed for, whether you are from Iblados or from afar. Lots of different options that are showing up in our player's guide for that. But it opens up a question of like, why us? Why now? What else is happening under the hood? Is this all a good thing? And so over the course of the Mythspeaker Adventure Path, you're going to be digging into what is this mythic power? Where does it come from? Is this really our destiny? And what is our way of shaping the future of the archipelago of Iblados? So one of the main lessons that helped shape how this adventure path worked was looking back at another mythic adventure path that we had done, Wrath of the Righteous, in first edition. And that's one where a little bit of the feedback was regarding the first volume, where it's framed as this mythic adventure path, but except for the very last encounter, you don't actually get mythic power. With Mythspeaker, I wanted to make sure that we had mythic power much closer to the beginning of the adventure path so that you could enjoy all these cool new toys as early as possible. So partway through that first volume, you're going to be getting mythic power, and you'll be exploring it throughout the course of things. The other great thing, if you haven't already seen War of Immortals, where mythic adventuring and mythic abilities show up, is that mythic abilities are pretty easy to tack onto your character. It's not much more complicated than like the free archetype rule. And in a way, it plays a lot like it, where you're getting a couple of extra mythic feats in parallel with your normal character progression. And you have a couple of mythic points that are fueling your abilities. But other than a couple of like little recharge conditions and how you can spend them, you don't have a lot to track. So it's pretty nice and easy to use.
All right, John, I know that you've got a lot of love for history and archaeology. Iblados has certainly got a lot of Greek tones to it. How Greek is it?
It's based on a real mythology. So this is not I first got involved in Iblados with Pathfinder campaign setting Distant Shores in first edition. And one of the things that I had in mind when I was kind of picking up Iblados from like the two paragraphs that existed beforehand was that I didn't really want to have the Greek gods show up exactly as they were. So like there is no Zeus or Poseidon or something like that. And so rather you have this hero god tradition. In addition, we play around with a lot of kind of either Greek mythological or classical mythological monsters. But we always are kind of doing our own little variants of them. So yeah, you're going to see some harpies. You're going to see, in this case, we're seeing a creature that is kind of based on the Greek Furies, brass-taloned vendetta hunters. And so when you get to have a little bit of a descent into the underworld at some point during this adventure, you might be running into a few of these who have some deep questions as to who the heck you are and why are you here. So again, we're drawing inspiration from a lot of it, but we're always giving it a Paizo and Pathfinder and Lost Omens twist, because direct mimicry is not the goal. Instead, it's how can we build the same themes and the same sort of feel that you would hope to have from we're playing Greek myth stuff, but make it your own.
Excellent. So Iblados is like steeped in mythic power, and it has the tradition of hero gods, and has things that are large scale divine that are very accessible to just everyday people there. Can you talk a little bit about what's involved in being a hero god?
Yeah, so hero gods are in many ways public figures. So when we looked at one of our cities in distant shores, Iliosos, it had two still living hero gods, and they basically acted as very important advisors to the city, but they're not like divine monarchs or sorcerer kings or anything like that. And it kind of varies by the hero god. So some places it might be, yep, we sure do rule as demagogues. But other places it's entirely different. One of the great things about being able to do this adventure path is the back matter content. And so we're able to do not only a gazetteer of one of our cities, but also one of the Iblados region as a whole. And then in the third book, we have what's called the Carthage Bay area, which is the bay in which Iblados sits, and we explore a lot of the surrounding geography. So what you're seeing is a north is to the left for the record, image of Iblados as well as some of the surrounding territories. So we dig into a bunch of these larger islands, a bunch of interesting sites all throughout. And then in that third book, we explore, hey, let's put some names on some of these coastal areas and what's going on here. How do they play into some of the other neighboring powers like the Padishah Empire of Kalesh and nearby Vudra, which is going to be slightly off the map to the east. So we've really been able to dig into that a whole bunch. But the matter of hero gods and what's their role is, in a way, you are expected to act as a divine patron. So in the course of this adventure path, you're going to have this very gradual growth of like what does it mean to be a hero god, and what are our responsibilities, and which of these responsibilities do we accept. So in book 2, you will have people reaching out to you and being like, hey, Ken has cantrips, and or miracles clause, and it's up to you to kind of define how much of our own personal power are we willing to put into these people who are looking up to us, and how much do we just want to be classic adventurers, and the choice is yours. And to explore that a little bit, there is an article in the second volume that explores kind of expansion of the leadership rules of how to not only manage your growing cult, but also some of the things that the cult can do for you.
Excellent. All right. Let's switch gears a little bit from adventure paths to something brand new that we haven't done before. Coming out in September, we have Dawn of the Frogs, and it is everything you need adventure that James did development on. So I'm going to let him talk about that for a little bit.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, this is a Jason Bowman shenanigan-filled adventure. The idea of Dawn of the Frogs is that, if you're going up to the cabin with a bunch of friends for a weekend, or you're at a convention, or you're in some other situation where you want to play Pathfinder or an RPG of any kind, but you don't have your 60 pounds of books with you, Dawn of the Frogs is there to help out. This is not a beginner teaching tool. That's something we do with the beginner box. This is also not a adventure path or an adventure where you're expected to expand on it and last for a long time. This is one short adventure split into 3 chapters. So in theory, 3 different game nights you could play here. And all of the rules you'll need to reference are in this box, along with character sheets, dice, rules reference sheets, free poster maps, double-sided poster maps with all of the encounters in there, a bunch of pawns for you to use. And you can just crack this open. All you'll need to really bring are pencils and just start playing. The plot is basically there's a small town in the swamp, and they got a frog-related problem going on, and you are playing iconic characters in here, and you have to go deal with those pesky frogs. So it's a fun little first-level adventure. Not one where you're going to, level up during the entire thing. It's really focused on giving you everything you need to play for your next game night.
All right, so it's this has all of those, like the maps in there are like full scale battle maps.
Oh
right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
just pull the pawns out, set everything out, and go about your day.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. What was the estimated time per adventure you were saying? Probably.
Yeah, about a night. There's about like 4 or 5 encounters for each one, and again, they're simple encounters, and so you should be able to play through maybe 4 hours or something like that.
Excellent.
And there's of course some groups like back in college where you do all nighters. You probably do the whole thing as a game night, but it's a lot of stuff going on in there.
It's fun getting adventures back in boxes.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely something we've wanted to do for a long time. Folks who've been gamers for decades can remember older giant mega adventures that came in boxes. This is not a mega adventure, but it is an all self-contained box thing. And I hope people like it, because if it does well and people enjoy it, it's something we can explore further.
All right, so James, while we got you on the mic, we're going to talk about another upcoming adventure path. Starting in October is Revenge of the Rune Lords. Give us a little rundown of that.
So, side note, I accidentally mentioned the title Revenge of the Rune Lords, I think 1 or 2 PaizoCons before accidentally, because it was already in my mind. I was working on it, and I had to like cover it. It's like, oh no, I meant Rise of the Rune Lords, or Return of the Rune Lords. So, yeah, this is a 12th to 20th level adventure path. It's also for mythic characters, just as Myth Speakers kind of covers your mythic calling arena of mythic play. Revenge of the Rune Lords covers the mythic destinies. So this is when you are fully leaned into your mythic goals and mythic place in the world. And it also plays on this whole tradition of the Rune Lords adventures that we've done before. Rise of the Rune Lords, Shattered Star, Return of the Rune Lords, and more recently, 7 Dunes for Sandpoint, which is Rune Lords adjacent. But if you play through 7 Dunes for Sandpoint, you'll end up at 12th level, which is a great way to just segue into this new adventure path, because a lot of the themes carry through. Of course, 7 Dunes for Sandpoint, you're not mythic characters. So there's a section at the start of this one that covers how you become mythic, if you were like not mythic already. But it's also a great thing for like if you played through Myth Speakers and you want to continue your mythic journey, you can head across the world and jump into Revenge of the Rune Lords. There's a level gap between Myth Speakers and Revenge of the Rune Lords, and that's sort of intentional so that like the GM can build something where you're going through an overland journey and all of that stuff and gaining your levels as you go. But there's also advice inside of Revenge of the Rune Lords for like if you just want to power level through that 11th level and get into your mythic destinies fast, that will be supported as well. So the plot of this one, and I don't want to get into too many spoilers, but it's a certain rune lord. Yeah, I guess I could spoil it. Xandergol is back so in the previous areas doing his thing. In Return of the Rune Lords, Xandergol got killed, and then this is spoilers for that thing, so close your ears if you're playing. He got killed, and then the player characters killed his backup, and then the player characters found a soul and helped kick that into the Eye of Abaddon, looming over the entire outer plane. And that's pretty much dead for dead. And the way that we bring Xandergol back is something that we've kind of sort of been thinking on the entire time since very early in the God's Reign thing. The first adventure is called Lord of the Trinity Star, and folks who have been paying attention have heard and read about this mysterious Trinity Star that fell over the skies of the Kodar Mountains in the Saga Lands, a falling star that trailed a tail of red light, a tail of black light, and a prismatic trail of light. And so I'm just saying that if you have a god die, that's a pretty good reason to have some sort of incident happen that can bring back one of your favorite villains to plague the PCs again. And I really wanted to do an adventure path where it's Xandergol focused, because ever since very, very first Burnt Offerings adventure for Rise of the Rune Lords, Xandergol has been on stage as the most powerful Rune Lord, but you never get to fight him in that incarnation. And so this one is very much, all right, you are now, because he's a mythic guy, it has to be a mythic adventure as well. So this one, you start out as mythic heroes who. Queen Sortian, who is now running New Thassalon, is like, I'm trying to integrate my new nation into the modern world. She's building a portal that will link New Thassalon's capital city, Zinchalas, which she's renamed Zenurithnia, to link it through a portal to Absalom and other cities so that there can be more trade flowing through, that you don't have to walk over what are essentially the Himalayas to get there. Player characters show up to help celebrate this event. And it being an adventure path, things go bad, basically. And you have to step in and become the big mythic heroes that you were always destined to be when Sortian and Xanargol and other sort of elements, maybe above your pay grade at the current point, are doing stuff that allows you to get away, gather your resources, investigate, do a bunch of crazy adventures, and seek out a chance to stop Xanargol from having revenge. I mean, like I was saying, he's been killed by rune lords and player characters over and over and over again, and he's pretty angry that he's been denied his rulership of the world. And so this is about, to a certain extent, his revenge on everything else. But it's more than that, because he's been an awful person to the other rune lords as well. And so they are trying to get revenge on Xanargol. Player characters, of course, trying to get revenge as well, revenge on the rune lords rather than revenge of the rune lords. So there's all sorts of themes like that going in there. One thing that we are doing in particular for this one is we are introducing 4 new mythic destinies, and those will show up in the first volume. So you'll want to chat with your GM about getting those accessible and unlocked and all that. For these 4, we wanted to lean into the themes of the adventure path. One of the things I really, really enjoy about the new mythic rules is how narrative focused they are. They're not just, powers that you bolt onto your character to make them tougher, but there are things that they're strongest when they're tied directly into the adventure path. And one thing that we're both trying to do is, as we are doing these encounters, we're saying, like, here, earn mythic points for doing this. Here's a place where you can do that. So to help the GM guide things along to make sure that the player characters have those resources to be mythic. Before, I don't want to get too many spoilers about those 4 mythic destinies, but we've got the Avenging Rune Lord, which is where your character has maybe been reincarnated from a previous Rune Lord or has their spirit kind of inside them, empowering them. So you've got like Rune Lord mojo to help you out. You've got I forget the name of this one. There's a hero where you're basically playing like you are the scion of a previous player character, perhaps. If you played one of the previous adventure paths, you're playing your kid who is now destined to do greater. Or maybe if you had a TPK and you want your character to play. It's a way you can actually play a character in a previous adventure path again here as a mythic reincarnation of that hero. We've got the Time Racked destiny. One of the elements of the previous Return of the Rune Lords was we had this entire city that was lost in time for thousands and thousands of years, suddenly comes back in the modern era. And so you could play a character who is either associated with that or has been affected by that, and you're now kind of separated from time. So you have a lot of time powers, like not time travel, but the ability to like bring duplicates of yourselves in or manipulate time flow and stuff like that. And then the last one is leaned into sort of the God's Reign War Shard type stuff. It's called the War Shard Hero, I believe. Some of these names have changed. So, but this one is basically you have been struck by a War Shard in a way that is making you and your weapon become more and more combined together. And the goal of that one is eventually to you become an artifact weapon of your choice. And so there's a lot of...
Can finally become an 8th Sword of Sin?
Yeah, you could do something like that or whatever, It's really, all of these things are left up to the players. I tried really hard to make sure that they all covered, rather than either focusing on a specific class, covering types of play like... spell casting or skill use or combat or anything like that. So hopefully both people will get a kick out of those things. And of course, there's lots of mythic spells and artifacts and items and other shenanigans. Yeah, John?
Yeah, so I have 2 questions that come to mind. And I'll start with the trollish one first. So awesome. If I become an 8th Sword of Sin and I get wielded by a different player character, what's the action economy like?
First of all, there are trolls in this adventure path, so you spoiled a little bit of it there accidentally.
Oh no!
That archetype, it doesn't really interact in that way. You become a sword, but when you all of these destinies basically build up toward a 20th level immortality.
Mhm.
And the goal of that specific destiny is you become an artifact, and artifacts are immortal. So once you become that sword, you are basically at the end of the adventure path, and you can manifest a version of yourself so it looks like you're still out there fighting.
Oh, okay.
It's not a case where somebody else can pick you up and wield you. But I mean, if that were the case, the action economy would be the same. Just like intelligent items already have their own actions.
I'm just waiting for, Adam to hit 20th level, me to hit 20th level. I turn into a sword. Adam picks me up and throws me into a volcano, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, well, Adam does that sort of thing, I hear.
Yeah,
We do fun things on the weekends.
Management.
Yeah.
We do live within driving distance of a volcano.
Yeah. The other question is, like, we have a bunch of different adventure paths, all of them alliterative and tying into Rune Lords. So this is like what, installment number 4. What are you doing here that you haven't had a chance to do in previous Rune Lords adventure paths?
So the main thing is put Xandergo on screen for you to fight when he's at full power. That's something that we've never been able to do before. There's some other stuff, since it's mythic. This is the first adventure path with the Rune Lords that is mythic, so that means you can potentially directly interact with things like the Oliphant of Chandelier, or other really powerful legendary figures like the Ashen Man, which we've been teasing a lot. There's maybe the cover of the third adventure, player characters on top of Spindlehorn conjuring the Oliphant, which is, there's the Ashen Man, who is
Sometimes
this
you gotta
kind of
do
figure. Yeah, figure of apocalypses who is somehow involved with the whole thing. So it's just playing with a bunch of the more powerful foes and personas in the whole Rune Lords storyline for the first time, where you get to not only be sidelined but actually be the ones in charge of it. But we aren't putting the Bristleborn in here. You can't. That's unfair.
And
No, I take that back. I am putting a Bristleborn here, but he's got the weak template, so it's all good.
I know that we've done behind the scenes a little bit of testing out of some high level combats and whatnot on the narrative team, and you've kind of been the lead on a lot of our higher level adventure paths of late, especially with like level 19, 20, and mythic power. Like, I think you're the only one who's been able to play with somebody like, now you're fighting a level 24 or 25 or whatever thing. Has it been feeling right? Like, is it a good challenge?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's Jessica Redikoff wrote that last adventure, and she really, she's already got this amazing imagination to really lean into these things where you're doing stuff that you can't do when you're first level. I don't want to spoil too much, but you maybe get to raid Sorshin's clothes closet in one encounter. But there's elements in there where you're facing things so powerful and so over the top that I don't know that this would have been as satisfying in a previous edition with so many complicated things going on. I think second edition's action economy and just the way the math scales and everything makes it so much more fun to play, I guess.
All right. So I'm going to give each of you a last chance to say something about one of the things you've talked about, and then we might hop into questions.
Sounds good.
So those of you in the chat, if you haven't asked your questions, get them in there. We've got the moderators collecting them for us, and we'll be going through those. Anything else from either of you?
I can jump in real quick. Again, one of the things that you asked about new things in the Rune Lords thing, and that's very much the case. This is also a super nostalgic element, where this is stuff that I've been working on the entire time. This is the first time we've done a Rune Lords, directly Rune Lords related thing in second edition. So just being able to go back to places we visited before in the previous adventures and allow player characters to play there again and explore new locations and the like, or stuff that we've mentioned even in Volume 1 but have never gone to, it's a lot of fun. And let me double down on that 7 Dooms for Sandpoint element, where if you play through that one, certain characters that you learn about in that adventure path end up being key players in Revenge of the Rune Lords, so that they are on the cover of one of the volumes. And I'm trying not to spoil too much, but this is someone who maybe thinks of themselves as the 8th Rune Lord, a rune lord associated with predictions and divinations and looking into the future, and is associated with the sin of vainglory, and maybe or maybe not also wants revenge. So
I think from a mid-speaker perspective, one of the things that I really enjoy is playing around with how the back matter articles and back matter content looks. And whenever we have an adventure path that releases alongside a hardcover book like from the RPG line, like War of Mortals, especially one that introduces new classes, it's really fun to introduce new character options for those classes. And few classes are as good at tying in character mechanics to the ongoing storyline as the Exemplar is. And so being able to create new epithets that are specifically tied into your accomplishments in the adventure path was really fun.
And I'll cheat, and my last thing will be about Revenge of the Rune Lords. So one of the things that I am really excited about for Revenge is something that James hit on, is that it draws on a lot of the history of the Rune Lords. So certainly you can play it not having played any of the previous Rune Lords APs, but if you have, you'll get a lot more out of it. There's a lot of little Easter eggs. I really tried to we really tried to like put in little Easter eggs about previous heroes, and that's sort of like how the mythic rules, at least I felt, James, was like that's one of the ways that the mythic rules sort of manifest themselves, is that you are walking in the footsteps of heroes that have fought the Rune Lords before, and you're just as there's been Rune Lords for a long time on Golarion, there have been heroes to oppose them. So I'm excited about that.
cool. Actually, speaking about that, I was reminded we do have art of that third character. I've already shown off Afterman and Xandergul. So there's our 8th Rune Lord, Liralaroo, and what she does in previous adventures, you'll have to play those to find out. What she does in this one is she's kind of a trigger to unlock some of your mythic destinies in a way that is sort of surprising, but pretty cool.
The follow-up question while we have the art up there is, every Rune Lord has their own polearm. What type of polearm is that? Is that a Naginata?
That's a Naginata, correct. Mm-hmm. That's one of the fun things when I first making the Rune Lords, is we wanted to do an adventure path. Starting out, that was like, this feels like the safe, fantasy adventures that you were already used to, because we're transitioning from the magazines to something new. So it's like fight the evil wizard. That's about as, without going to the fight the evil dragon. That's what you do. But we wanted to make it new. So by giving all the Rune Lords polearms, that was a way to like, well, these are wizards, but they can chop at you from 10 feet away. So they're worse than wizards. Better than wizards.
Also, speaking of like Revenge of the Rune Lords, and then earlier Bill was talking about like other adventures. Here's a little small spoiler related to me and Revenge of the Rune Lords, is that early when I was brainstorming things for Shades of Blood, James and I came across the idea to put a character mentioned in Shades of Blood into Revenge of the Rune Lords as like a little cameo, which, if for nothing else, it just shows that all of our adventures take place in the same world, and people can show up in places you don't expect.
It's a little more than a cameo as it played out. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah,
I didn't read the final presentation. All right, so I'm going to hop to some of these questions that are conveniently put over here in this handy document.
And before you ask your first one, Adam, just a reminder, if we have some questions that we don't get to, we are doing some follow-up chat in the follow-up on Discord. There's a channel for our panel.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. And most of us have AMAs as well, and we'll take questions there throughout the rest of PaizoCon.
Yep.
All right. Let's see what we're going to go through first. James already kind of answered that one. All right. I'll go ahead and take this one. It said, how did you decide on the theme for Dawn of the Frogs as the first Pathfinder game night? Well, the product as a whole was kind of the brainchild of Jason Bowman. and he, in coming up with the idea, he kind of the adventure theme was kind of part of the package. And he does like stories that are very classic fantasy and kind of, towns that are kind of not looking the best and that are in really good need for some heroes to make things right. So that covered that one pretty all right.
I think one of the other things that kind of ties into that expands to adventures as a whole is whenever we're kind of brainstorming, what do we want to do in this particular adventure slot? We're like, we're in book 3, this adventure path, and we know what book 4 is going to be, but 3, we start opening up like Monster Core, the creature level list, and we see what are some of the creatures in this level range, and do these inspire some ideas? And so I think that also helps to shape how we do some of these intro or accessible adventures.
For sure, yeah. I mean, anytime we have lower level things, you've got to be careful not to make it the same thing all the time. Like I have a predilection for using gremlins because I really like low level adventures, and gremlins are fun low level antagonists. But yeah, looking at some of my past adventures, I'm like, maybe I use gremlins a little too much. Which this is a question I had from our previous conversation when James was talking about the festival that goes wrong. And then also this weekend, I saw someone commenting about APs starting with festivals. What do you guys think if we start off an adventure path with a festival, but everything goes right? It's all great. Everything's fine. You get treasure. People say nice things about you. You get full and you go about your day.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like an adventure path. That sounds like a vacation path. We don't do that line.
But hear me out. And this is, me being horrible and liking to make players and player characters cry. What if you start off with the festival, it all goes well, and you basically, the hook into the follow-up adventure is, if you hadn't been distracted by this, everything went well in festival, you could have been 5 miles to the east and actually stopped this horrible tragedy from happening. Now a tragedy has happened, and you're fresh off your vacation. You're back in the office on day 1, and somebody has, foisted the pile of terrible stuff right in front of you and been like, save this village.
All right, this one's for James. I lost my place.
No.
I know, it's terrible. Yes, will Bellamaria show up in Revenge of the Runelords?
I don't want to get too many spoilers, but one of the things I want to do with this
answer, you can plead the 5th.
Okay. Yes. To speak a little bit more to that, one of the things I wanted to do with this is basically tie everything up with the Runelord storyline and get everything that has been lingering taken care of. So yes, Bellarius does play a significant role in this adventure path, and people I saw asking about Aethusa, the thrice-born Runelord, she's also got a role in here. So chances are good that if there's a Runelord adjacent thing that you saw in a previous campaign and that Runelord didn't get double killed, chances are good that there's a resolution for that storyline in Revenge of the Runelords.
All right. Next question. This is going to be for all of you. Amalgam81 asks a really good question. Any potential story threads set up during first edition AP's setting books that you're looking to potentially revisit in the future? This feels a little bit like a, half of a team meeting in this panel right now, because we talk about this kind of stuff a lot. I'm going to put Bill on the spot. I haven't heard his voice in a while.
Well, there are still places that we haven't visited in second edition. So there's still plenty of material to work with that we can sort of like with Iblados, and Runelords too. Like we established these things in first edition. Now here's our chance to revisit them in second edition. So, all sorts of interesting places like, the Darklands and, also all sorts of different themes and adventures that we can hit in second edition.
I can be a little bit more into that. The next two adventure paths I've been deeply involved with are 100% building off the stories we've established in first edition.
I recently did the same thing, sort of, with Shades of Blood by setting it in Talmendor's Bounty, even though it doesn't really pick up too many of the threads from there. But yeah, like I would like to see some of those threads picked up, because there's other stuff in the region that could have far-reaching implications.
Yeah, and I think that when we first launched second edition, there was this, hey, let's take all of the, let's call them canonical endings of adventure paths and other things, and blend them into the setting now. And I think that playing around with some of the, you did this in first edition, now deal with the consequences, stories can be really interesting, especially for people who've been playing Pathfinder for a while, where they may have played that first edition adventure path and are like, oh yeah, I guess we did do that, and now it has become the problem of our latest generation of characters. Could be a lot of fun. So I'm always looking at that, continuing the campaign section of an adventure path and thinking, how can we play on some of the ramifications there?
We also did that fun little bit at the end of Stolen Fate, where Luis and I kind of brainstormed together and made these list of possible futures that player characters are avoiding or have to deal with. All of those things are hints towards adventure paths and adventure storylines that we want to tackle. So that's not edition crossing, but it's definitely something that we set into motion, and a lot of the stuff that we hint about are things that we already have planned to do.
All right, James, while I look for another question, I'm going to ask you this one because I know you can answer it. What determines why a compilation happens?
It's a combination of whether or not the non-compiled version is sold out, whether or not the compilation to be will support new products, how difficult it is to do, and if there's somebody in the narrative department that is passionate and excited to compile it. It's the idea of like, this one's a bestseller and is sold out is definitely a strong contender for why we would do a compilation. But so is this one is sold out and it was divisive. Lets us go in and start, maybe fix a few things. I've always wanted to do a compilation of Second Darkness, because I suspect the one that the people are the most disappointed by, and of all of the adventure paths in the first edition we ever did, and pre-first edition even in this case, it's one that a remaster of it really kind of needs to happen, I feel, in order to recontextualize what's going on historically there. It's not on any schedule yet. I'm not working. I can confirm that, but we do more adventure paths than we do compilations. And I saw somebody mention Upthread asking if we're going to compile and update and remaster older adventure paths adventures before into second edition. Yeah, Kingmaker was not the last. And in fact, we did Crown of the Kobold King as a compilation as well. And those types of things are going to be things we are going to continue to do. If there's something you want us to do, let us know either at PaizoCon or on threads or online at our message boards or Reddit or wherever. We can't do them all, but we're definitely going to do some of them at some point.
All right, this next one's for John from Sir Newt. If you had to give a movie or book that encapsulates the mood of the AP of Mythspeaker as a stylistic touchstone, what would it be?
Gosh, I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but the old school Battle of the Titans movie with
Wrath of the Titans.
Wrath of the Titans. There we go. I think could be pretty solid. Like if you go back to some of those.
I was thinking Jason the Argonauts.
Yeah, Jason the Argonauts, Golden Age of Cinema, sort of like even the Sinbad movie. That sort of stuff certainly is a good starting point. But in terms of themes and whatnot, it's going to be a bit of a heavier read, but Ovid's The Metamorphosis would be a good one because so I said that I bring in a lot of kind of classical mythological themes, and in addition to hey, we do a lot of sailing in Greece and to a lesser extent Rome. there sure is some maritime adventuring, but there's also metamorphosis, which is a recurring theme in classical mythology, not archaeology. And so one of the things that mythic power tends to do in Iblados is cause those transformations, and sometimes it is triggered by, an outburst of emotion or need or other desire, or a wish cast to whatever hero god happens to be listening. Even one of the hero gods that I was able to introduce in an article in the first volume, Zaki, is kind of vaguely Circe and or Hecate inspired. And, if you don't show proper respect when you visit her and ask for favors, then you might end up being transformed into some sort of horrific chimera that will wander her island for the remainder of your natural life. But transformation happens a lot, and transformation as you from a mortal to a hero god is one of those several routes. So Ovid's Metamorphosis would be a great resource.
Excellent. Ashkalor asked, why so much mythic? And I think I can answer that by saying War of Immortals came out and people were excited about it, and we wanted to support it with adventures. And I think by having the choice of doing two separate mythic adventures so you could experience the lower level and the higher level, I think was a really good approach to it. John, do you want to build on that a little?
Only slightly, because low and high level play a little bit differently, but they also they show off different elements to show that mythic is a cool, viable thing even if you're second level, and mythic is a cool, viable thing even if you're level 20. And it doesn't just have to be the high octane, highest level stuff.
And I think it's really interesting how the two APs have a different take on the mythic rules, right? Like Mythspeaker is very classic Jason and the Argonauts type mythic, whereas Revenge of the Runelords is totally different and is a different way of using the mythic rules. So
yeah, it definitely shows the breadth of that system.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This one is for James. A previous question Prince Malleus asked was answered. So the bonus question is, what's a cool or interesting ability that Zandergul has?
I'm
just digging for spoilers, apparently.
Okay, this is a spoiler. So a lot of the Rune Lords are dead, and they're fun things to fight. People who are eagle-eyed may have noted a familiar figure flying around on that Mirage Dragon in the first Rune Lords art we showed off. I think Zandergul's coolest ability is, there he is on the dragon there. It looks an awful lot like a certain Rune Lord of Sloth, maybe. One of Zandergul's strongest story abilities in this one is he created a ritual called Raise Rune Lord. And the player characters are going to be fighting a lot. It's sort of like the old school Simulacrum spell or the Shadow Double spell in the remastered Player's Guide 2. He basically takes a fragment of a previous Rune Lord, some of their dust or one of their items or something like that, and he creates a duplicate of that Rune Lord who draws from their memories but is like bound to his will. And so the player characters in this one are going to be fighting a lot of Rune Lords, and we ordered a lot of new art for Rune Lords, not just the ones that you are familiar with, like Krone and Karzug and Elasnist and others, but Rune Lords going all the way back for that we've only ever mentioned by name. You're going to be fighting a lot of these Rune Lords, and it's hopefully going to be, and in some cases, becoming their Avengers.
I really like that condition of that ritual of like, you need a piece of them. Makes for some interesting narrative hooks of like, hey, how does he get his hands on X, Y, or Z?
And in fact, there's a Thessalonian monument dungeon that we mentioned in the very first ever called the Emerald Chambers.
Sure.
The Emerald Chambers.
Oh yeah.
Which is basically the tomb of, it's a memorial to First King Zin. But it's also a place where all of the other Rune Lords kind of have their kind of memorials and vaults and graveyards where their memories are buried, if not their bodies were buried. It's sort of like the mausoleum version of Runeforge. And the second adventure in this adventure path is called Crypt of Runes. And to answer Mirror Wolf 9, yes, you're going to spend a lot of time in the Emerald Chambers. A specific point, yeah. There's the hub room inside of a chamber with emerald colored walls, where you're fighting a rune giant and hopefully not getting scorched. And if you do, this one is Bill's fault if you get TPK'd in this one.
That mace looks like it involves a reflex save, not an attack roll.
Yeah, that's a spoiler.
All right. I'm going to toss this one at Bill because I think that he's probably best suited to answer it. Said, what do y'all think is the best or easiest AP to run for D&D GMs and players? And I asked Bill because of this group, Bill probably has the most experience with D&D and Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Abomination Vaults is probably the way to go if you are. I'm not sure exactly what the question is if you are coming from D&D to Pathfinder.
So. That's what I'm assuming. Yeah, which would be the easiest for someone coming from D&D to pick up and play for Pathfinder.
Well, Abomination Vaults would be great because it's sort of a classic dungeon mega dungeon crawl. So like you could a lot of the same ideas and themes are there, and it's something that everybody is familiar with. That's one of the things about Pathfinder and D&D is like all the genetics are the same, right? Like we are heroes who are going into a dungeon to fight evil and collect treasure. So like I think Abomination Vaults would port pretty well, and it would be a great intro, and it starts at first level, so you can learn as you go.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a couple of the ones that I've worked on of late, and I do a lot of ones that have started at pretty low level. I think like Triumph of the Tusk would be an interesting one to start people off at, not only because it's starts you at third level, but it's also a really good dive into how the Lost Omen setting treats orcs, and gives you kind of this festival atmosphere at the beginning, that you're trying out your skills, that you're trying to show off, you're getting to know what your PC can do. And in a way, that sort of thing also allows somebody who's trying out a new game system to see what the abilities and limits of their character are in a safe-ish environment.
All right, 2 minutes. See if we can get one more in. Something that is good and appropriate. All right, nice. This is a simple one. Jeremy Korf, friend of the show, asks, will we ever see another adventure on Golarion's moon? And I don't have an immediate answer for that, but now I want to.
Now that we've got Starfinder and Pathfinder kind of on the same path, Starfinding, because they're all with second edition Starfinder, those rules are compatible. It's possible that we might go to other planets or like the moon or something like that. We don't really have anything in the works right now for that. One thing I am really passionate about is making sure that we don't mix those soups together all the time. Make sure that both games are, because they're very different flavors of gaming. They both use the same rules, but I think that mixing them together too much, especially before second edition Starfinder has a chance to really wow and impress people, which it's going to be doing for sure. It's important for us to let those two parallel tracks go the same way before we merge things together. And that includes just storylines, like going to other, we've gone to other planets and stuff in second edition, like in Strength of Thousands and in Gatewalkers. But nothing planned right now for the moon. Although, again, one that I just really worked on. No, that's a tease. I'm not going to say that.
Too much.
You don't go to the moon, but the moon is there.
All right, so we're at time, so we're going to wrap this up. I'll give all of you a chance for any last words, but if anyone wants to continue to ask questions, we've got the Adventures in Golarion channel on the Discord, as well as our AMAs. Gentlemen, anything?
I'm good. We'll see you over there.
All right.
Yep, sounds
Thank you,
good to me.
everybody, for tuning in, and I hope you're having a good time at PaizoCon, and have fun and roll them crits.